There is a moment that is very difficult to name, one that almost everyone who has been involved with a narcissist has experienced. It is not the moment of an argument, not the moment of abandonment. It is the moment you realize that person can be very kind, just not with you. You see them laughing easily with others. You see them patient, attentive, even full of energy in superficial connections. And then, when they return to you, the one they chose, the one who stayed, the one who truly invested, everything shifts. Fewer words, colder, tenser, as if your very presence has become a burden. What unsettles you is not their behavior, but the illogic of it. If they are capable of gentleness, why is it not given to the person who matters most? If they can be present with others, why do they withdraw when they are with you? And from here, a very dangerous process begins. You stop observing them and start doubting yourself. You begin to wonder whether you are too demanding, too sensitive, too deep, or too real. You start adjusting yourself, speaking less, needing less, waiting more in the hope that things will return to how they were in the beginning. But the more you shrink, the farther away you feel pushed. Not because you did something wrong, but because you are standing in the very position that makes them the most uneasy. From a Jungian perspective, a narcissist does not avoid people they do not care about. They avoid those who force them to confront themselves. And this is the core paradox. The chosen one is not the one treated best, but the one who carries the greatest psychological risk. An option does not require real presence. An option does not activate shame, fear, or a sense of losing control. An option allows the narcissist to remain exactly who they already are. You do not. A genuine bond with you requires consistency, accountability, and the confrontation of immature parts within themselves, things they never learned how to do. That is why the order of the relationship is reversed. Those on the outside are treated gently. The one on the inside bears the pressure. The superficial receives the pleasant version. The attached partner receives distance, defensiveness, and devaluation, not because you lack value, but because your value is too difficult for them to sustain. This is not a story of personal emotion. It is a structure with its own logic, one that repeats itself across many relationships with narcissists. And if you do not see that logic, you will keep trying to fix yourself inside a system that was never designed to hold the truth. In this video, we will break down 8 core reasons to answer a painful but necessary question directly. Why does a narcissist treat options better than the person they chose? Not so you can endure more, but so you can stop being wrong about yourself and step out of the game altogether. Reason 1. The option does not activate the shadow. The chosen one does. To understand why a narcissist can be pleasant with an option but harsh with the person they chose, we have to begin with a foundational truth. Narcissists do not react to people. They react to the level of threat those people pose to their ego structure. An option does not create that threat. An option is not close enough to require emotional presence. It does not demand consistency. It does not require accountability. It does not mirror inner contradictions. As a result, when interacting with an option, the narcissist only needs to operate through the persona, the part of the self prepared for social interaction. This persona is smooth, familiar, and safe. In that space, they know what to say, how to behave, and most importantly, they do not have to touch any uncomfortable feelings inside themselves. The chosen one is different. Even if you do not demand, question, or do anything too much, simply staying long enough changes your position within their psychological system. You are no longer a casual interaction. You become a bond with weight, and that weight creates pressure. From a Jungian perspective, the shadow consists of the rejected parts of the self, feelings of inadequacy, primal shame, fear of abandonment, inner emptiness. For narcissists, the shadow is usually completely unintegrated. They do not have the capacity to stay with these feelings without destabilizing. As a result, their entire psychological life is organized around one central goal: preventing the shadow from being activated. The option does not activate the shadow because the option does not reflect anything real. The option does not force the narcissist to question who they are without admiration. It does not make them feel they could truly lose something if the connection ends. In other words, the option carries no psychological risk. The chosen one carries that risk without intending to. When you become important, the narcissist's nervous system does not interpret this as deeper connection, but as potential loss of control. You have the capacity to see the gaps they hide. You have the capacity to make them feel vulnerable. And vulnerability within their system equals danger. Because narcissists lack the internal skills to process this danger through self-awareness, they process it through behavior. They do not say, "I'm afraid," "I'm not okay," or "I'm triggered." Instead, they change how they treat you: colder, more distant, less invested, or more subtly. They make you feel too much, too sensitive, or difficult. This point is crucial. The shift is not meant to punish you, it is meant to stabilize their inner world. By devaluing you or creating distance, they reduce the pressure to confront the shadow. The discomfort inside is pushed outward and assigned to you. The option never receives this treatment, because the option does not create pressure that needs to be discharged. With an option, the narcissist does not need to defend, control, or withdraw. That is why they can appear good. But that goodness only exists in a space without depth. For the chosen one, the consequence is a slow but very clear process. You begin adjusting yourself to avoid triggering them. You speak less, expect less, keep your emotions within a safe range. Not because you want to manipulate, but because you sense that every time you show up fully, the relationship tightens. The problem is this: the shadow does not disappear because you make yourself smaller. It only goes quiet temporarily. And so the coldness, devaluation, or withdrawal returns. Each time closeness increases. This cycle does not end through your self-sacrifice. It only ends when the narcissist becomes capable of facing themselves, or when you step out of the role of carrying what they never processed. So, the option is not more favored. The option is simply the one who reveals nothing. You, because you reveal the shadow, are treated differently. Not because you lack value, but because you are real enough to threaten a structure that was never ready for the truth. Reason 2. The option does not threaten control. The chosen one collapses it. If reason 1 explains that the option does not activate the shadow, then reason 2 goes one layer deeper. The option does not threaten control, while the chosen one directly destabilizes the sense of power the narcissist depends on to function. For a narcissist, control is not a surface behavior. It is a core sense of safety. They do not need to control everyone at all times, but they need to know that they can withdraw, shut down, or reverse direction whenever they choose. As long as that sense remains intact, they feel secure. The option never puts this sense at risk. With an option, the narcissist is always in the upper position, emotionally, in terms of investment, and in the ability to leave. There is no commitment, no consequence for disappearing, no real loss. Because of that, they can be kind, relaxed, even generous. That kindness costs them nothing, because it does not come with a loss of power. The chosen one is structurally different. When you become important, something shifts very clearly inside the narcissist. The freedom to leave is no longer harmless. Losing you would not just mean losing an interaction, it would mean losing a stabilizing source for their ego. At that point, the relationship enters a dangerous zone, not dangerous because of conflict, but because of the loss of leverage. From a Jungian perspective, An immature ego clings tightly to control in order to avoid primal helplessness. For a narcissist, that helplessness is bound to the fear of abandonment and the fear of not existing without being reflected. That is why any relationship that makes them feel "I need this person" is interpreted by the psyche as a threat. This is the critical point. The chosen one stops being an option and becomes a risk. And when control is threatened, the narcissist does not increase connection to restore safety. They do the opposite. They reassert power. The most common way they do this is not through commands or overt aggression, but through emotional recalibration. They begin giving less, on and off, close, then distant, warm, then cold. Not randomly, but to ensure that you are tracking their rhythm rather than the other way around. The option is never pulled into this rhythm because there is no need. The option cannot destabilize the narcissist's position, so there is no need to control the option. With the chosen one, however, control becomes a survival need. From here, a very familiar experience begins to emerge. You feel like you have to monitor them, their mood, their timing, their distance, not because you are weak, but because the structure of the relationship has been warped. Control no longer resides in clarity, it resides in unpredictability. The narcissist does not need to say, "I control you." They only need to make you unsure of where they are emotionally today, and you will begin regulating yourself automatically. This is the most refined form of power, when the other person disciplines themselves in order to maintain stability. The option does not generate this kind of power dynamic, so it is never applied. The option receives the narcissist's pleasant version, because the narcissist does not need to defend their position in that relationship. With you, however, that position must be protected at all costs, because losing it would force the narcissist to face a terrifying truth: dependence. The irony is that narcissists are often not consciously aware that they are doing this. In their own mind, the story sounds like, "I just need space. I don't like being tied down. I hate drama." But beneath the surface, the real drive is this: "I cannot tolerate the feeling of not being in control of what matters." For the chosen one, the consequence is a very specific kind of exhaustion. You are not only hurt by the lack of love, but drained by living in a relationship where stability depends entirely on someone else's internal state. Over time, this erodes your sense of worth, even though you have done nothing wrong. The option does not experience this, not because they are stronger, but because they are not important enough for power to be activated. They remain outside the conflict zone. You, precisely because you stepped into the critical zone, become the place where power is exercised. Reason 3. The option only consumes the persona. The chosen one causes the persona to crack. A narcissist lives through the persona. This is not a preference, it is a mode of survival. The persona is the mask that allows them to function socially, be admired, and maintain the feeling that "I am okay." With an option, the persona works flawlessly because it is never challenged. The option comes to look, to respond, to consume the image, nothing more. In these interactions, the narcissist does not need to be a whole human being. They only need to perform the role correctly. The story is curated. Emotions are regulated. Intimacy stops at a social level. That is why they appear charming, likable, even warm, not because they are connecting deeply, but because the persona system encounters no resistance. The chosen one is different. You do not merely watch the persona. You are close enough to notice when it begins to fall out of rhythm. The silences that do not match the words, the disproportionate reactions to small things, the moments when they appear fine but clearly are not. And even if you never say it out loud, that recognition still exists as a quiet, constant pressure. According to Carl Jung, the persona is the social mask. It requires an audience, but it cannot tolerate a penetrating gaze. When someone sees through the persona, The mask is no longer a shelter, it becomes a vulnerability. For a narcissist, this is a dangerous situation. Why? Because the persona is not built to withstand intimacy. It is built to perform. As intimacy increases, the persona must either evolve into a genuine self, which the narcissist is not ready for, or it begins to crack. And when cracking occurs, the reflex is not inner repair, but protecting the mask by controlling the environment. That is when their treatment of you changes, not because you are difficult, but because you see. They begin to share less, avoid deeper conversations, shift the focus back to surface level interaction, or more subtly, they make you doubt your own intuition so that the penetrating gaze becomes blurred. The option never causes the persona to crack, because the option does not see through it. The option responds to the role correctly, praises at the right moments, laughs on cue, asks no questions that disrupt the script. As a result, the narcissist can be good to the option, the goodness of a smooth performance that never collides with truth. The chosen one unintentionally becomes a test the persona cannot pass, not because you demand too much, but because you stay long enough to notice what the persona cannot cover. When this happens, the narcissist does not feel understood, they feel exposed. And exposure, within their structure, equals the risk of losing control. Defensive responses therefore escalate. They reduce warmth, increase distance, flatten depth, not to hurt you, but to keep the persona functional. Because if the persona collapses, they have no immediate alternative. The consequence for you is a painful paradox. The more real you are, the more they withdraw. The closer you get, the more they conceal. Gradually, you are pushed into a choice. Either continue seeing clearly and tolerate the coldness, or adjust yourself to only see the surface so the persona can remain intact. The option is not more favored. The option is simply the one who does not crack the mask. You, precisely because you cause the persona to fracture, are treated differently. Not because you are wrong, but because you bring the relationship into a zone where truth begins to carry weight. Reason 4. The chosen one activates unconscious shame. The option does not. There is one emotion narcissists fear more than loss, more than abandonment: shame. Not shame over having done something wrong in a specific situation, but primal shame, the feeling that something about me is wrong. I am not enough. If I am fully seen, I will be rejected. With an option, this feeling never arises. An option is not close enough to reach the core. They do not look deeply enough to force self-reflection. Their gaze carries no psychological weight. As a result, interactions with an option remain on the surface, where there is nothing to be ashamed of, because nothing real is being exposed. The chosen one is different. When you become important, something very subtle happens. The narcissist begins to feel potentially judged, not because you are judging them, but because you are capable of seeing. That capacity makes the parts they have always hidden begin to tremble. And when those parts tremble, shame is activated. According to Carl Jung, shame is closely tied to the shadow, the rejected parts of the self that are too painful to acknowledge. For narcissists, the shadow often carries a core, unspoken story. If others see who I really am, they will leave. This story is rarely conscious, but it governs their reactions. Shame is not felt as shame. It is felt as discomfort, irritation, tension, the urge to avoid. And because narcissists lack the capacity to stay with that feeling internally, they must push it outward. The fastest way to do that is to turn the person who activates the feeling into the problem. That is when scrutiny begins. Not because you have changed, but because their gaze has shifted. Things that were once endearing become irritating. Minor differences are magnified. Small flaws are remembered and catalogued. This is not objective evaluation. It is a defensive mechanism. If they can believe you are the one with the problem, the shame inside them temporarily subsides. The option is never scrutinized this way, because the option does not activate shame. The option does not make the narcissist question whether they are enough, does not awaken the fear that one day the other person's gaze might reach the raw core beneath the mask. That is why the option receives ease, an ease untainted by defensiveness. The chosen one pays the price for intimacy. The more important you become, the more easily shame is triggered. And when shame is triggered, the narcissist does not say, "I feel ashamed." They say, through behavior, "There is something wrong with you." This is projection. Their inner discomfort is pushed onto you so they do not have to carry it. This is why so many people in relationships with narcissists begin to doubt themselves, not because they are weak, but because they are being placed in the position of carrying an emotion that does not belong to them. The narcissist's shame is transferred subtly, gradually through tone, words, withdrawal, and coldness. The option never carries this burden. Not because the option is better, but because the option is not close enough to become a container for shame. The option does not carry the weight of a real bond, and therefore does not become a surface for projection. Reason 5. The option does not require emotional accountability. The chosen one forces it. Narcissists are not afraid of love. They are afraid of the emotional responsibility that comes with love. These two things are not the same, but they are often confused. An option gives them a sense of connection without obligation. The chosen one is different. Simply by existing, you represent a chain of responsibilities they do not want to carry. With an option, everything happens in a zone of non-obligation. There is no need for consistency, no need to explain disappearances, no need to take responsibility for the other person's feelings. If they turn cold, the option adjusts. If they vanish, the option accepts it as normal. In this space, the narcissist can be kind without paying a price. The chosen one changes that structure. When you become important, their behavior begins to have consequences. A delayed message can hurt you. A broken promise can wound you. A withdrawal can create real distance. And it is precisely this capacity to affect another human being that triggers the narcissist's avoidance response. From the perspective of Carl Jung, an immature ego cannot distinguish between having an impact and being trapped. When the narcissist realizes that your emotions are linked to their actions, they do not experience this as deeper connection. They experience it as loss of freedom. Emotional responsibility is interpreted as confinement. This is when familiar phrases begin to appear. I need space, I hate drama, I don't want pressure. These statements are not meant to describe reality. They are meant to reduce obligation. By labeling your emotional needs as pressure, they give themselves permission to withdraw without having to face guilt. The option does not activate guilt, because the option does not place them in a position where care is required. When there are no clear expectations, there can be no violation. That is why the narcissist can be good to the option, with ease good within limits they choose, at moments they control, in ways that carry no responsibility. The chosen one does not allow such easy escape, not because you demand too much, but because real relationships inherently create obligation. Obligation here does not mean extreme sacrifice. It means very basic things: presence, consistency, respect for the impact one has on another person. And these basic requirements are precisely what feel burdensome to a narcissist. Because they do not want to carry that burden, they try to minimize the need. They call your desire for connection too sensitive. They frame your boundaries as controlling. They interpret your hurt as overreacting. This is not honest evaluation. It is a strategy to escape responsibility. The option never requires these conversations. The option never forces the narcissist to confront the consequences of their behavior. And so the option receives ease, and ease unchallenged by emotional ethics for the chosen one. The consequence is a very specific kind of exhaustion. You are not only deprived of care, you are gradually led to believe that needing care is wrong. When this repeats long enough, many people begin cutting down their own needs to lighten the load for the other person. But the truth is very clear. Narcissists treat options well because options do not require emotional accountability. They treat the chosen one harshly because that person forces them to confront the consequences of their own actions. And as long as responsibility is experienced as a threat, true intimacy will continue to be avoided. Reason 6. Devaluing the chosen one is how the narcissist saves themselves. A narcissist does not devalue you because they suddenly discovered your flaws. They devalue you because your value has become too dangerous for them. This is a point many people misunderstand. They assume devaluation means loss of interest, a change of heart, or the end of love. In reality, devaluation often begins precisely when attachment has gone beyond what the narcissist can tolerate. When you become the chosen one, you are not only emotionally important. You begin to hold something the narcissist deeply fears, the capacity to truly hurt them. You could leave and create a real void. You could see weaknesses they refuse to acknowledge. You might no longer be as easy to manipulate as before. At that point, the narcissist's ego enters a state of alarm. From a Jungian perspective, when an immature ego is threatened, it does not regulate itself through awareness, it restructures reality. A narcissist cannot accept that they are afraid, dependent, or vulnerable. Those states are too dangerous. So the story must change. The problem is not me, the problem is you. Devaluation is the tool that enables this reversal. The process of devaluation rarely begins loudly or all at once. It usually starts small, a vague remark, a seemingly harmless comparison, a joke with an edge. Each of these small details serves the same purpose, to make you smaller in their perception. When you become smaller, they feel larger. When you begin to doubt yourself, they regain a sense of safety. The option is never devalued in this way, because the option does not need to be made small. The option does not carry enough psychological weight to threaten the ego. The narcissist does not need devaluation to maintain power over an option. With the chosen one, however, devaluation becomes a necessary tool to restore the internal balance they require. One crucial point. Narcissists are often not consciously aware that they are devaluing. In their own mind, it is honest feedback, constructive criticism, being realistic, or just telling the truth. But the impact on you is unmistakable. You begin to wonder whether you are too sensitive, too demanding, or expecting too much. The moment you start doubting yourself, devaluation has done its job. Why does devaluation target only the chosen one? Because only that person makes the narcissist feel exposed and weakened. If your value remained intact in their eyes, they would have to face a terrifying truth. They are dependent on someone who could leave. Devaluation allows them to avoid that truth by making the idea of losing you psychologically easier to tolerate. In other words, devaluing you is how the narcissist prepares an exit in advance. Once they convince themselves that you are not as great as before, the fear of losing you diminishes. Not because their feelings are gone, but because those feelings have been numbed by defensive reasoning. The option never goes through this process. The option does not need to be made small, because the option was never large enough in the narcissist's inner world to begin with. The option remains outside the danger zone. You, precisely because you entered a place of importance, become the target of devaluation. The consequence for the chosen one is a kind of injury that is hard to name. You are not only treated with coldness, you are slowly led to question your own worth. And when this persists, many people do not leave because they are weak, but because they are trying to prove that they are not as flawed as the narcissist has subtly implied. But the truth must be stated plainly. Devaluation is not a sign that you have diminished. It is a sign that you have become too important in a system that cannot tolerate the truth. A narcissist does not devalue what is insignificant. They devalue only those who make them feel they could lose control. Reason 7. The option is an ego regulation tool. The chosen one bears the consequences. When the relationship with the chosen one becomes tense, the narcissist does not resolve that tension through dialogue or self-reflection. They resolve it through regulation, and the option is the most effective regulation tool available. For a narcissist, uncomfortable emotions are not signals to be listened to. They are states that must be calmed as quickly as possible. When you are close enough to activate fear, shame, or a sense of losing control, they need another place to breathe. The option fits that need perfectly. Close enough to provide attention, yet distant enough to make no demands for truth. The option is not sought for deep feeling, but for immediate effect, a light conversation, a compliment, a quick response. These restore the narcissist's sense that they are okay, desired, and still in control. There is no need to address the root cause, only to soothe the symptom. According to Carl Jung, when the ego cannot self-regulate, it seeks external objects to restore balance. The option functions as a safe resistor in the narcissist's emotional circuitry, absorbing excess pressure, reducing heat quickly without risking system collapse. This explains a familiar paradox. The more strained things are with you, the more pleasant they appear with the option. Not because the option is better, but because the option is being used to stabilize their inner state. You, by contrast, are the source of activation, so you are kept at a distance, given less investment, or devalued to prevent pressure from increasing. From here, a deeply unfair dynamic forms. Each time the real relationship demands depth, commitment, consistency, responsibility, the narcissist turns to the option to recharge. Once regulated, they return to you carrying no resolution, only temporary calm. The underlying problem remains untouched. The option never bears the consequences of this loop. The option receives only the easy parts. The chosen one carries the heavy parts: distance, silence, unnamed conflict. And because you matter, you become the place where pressure is discharged again when regulation fails. This is why many people find themselves cast as the difficult one, the demanding one. Even though they are simply responding to an unjust system, you are not causing disruption. You are standing where all the tension must pass through. The option is never pulled into depth, and therefore never collides with reality. The option helps the narcissist avoid change. You, precisely because you have the capacity to lead to real change, are perceived as a risk. And when the ego needs rapid regulation, the person who poses the greatest risk is pushed the farthest away. Reason 8. The narcissist chooses comfort, not truth. After everything that has been analyzed, the final reason, and also the most fundamental one, is simple yet difficult to accept. A narcissist does not choose what is right. They choose what they can tolerate. The option represents comfort. Comfortable because it makes no demands. Comfortable because it does not reflect anything back. Comfortable because it does not expose the immature parts within them. With an option, the narcissist can remain exactly as they are without having to change anything. And that is the key point. The chosen one is the opposite. You represent truth, not a judging truth, but a lived truth. Real emotions, real needs, real consequences. When they are with you, the narcissist cannot simply play a role. They are faced with the possibility of having to grow up, to take responsibility, to confront the inner gaps they have always avoided. According to Carl Jung, psychological maturation requires an individual to step out of the persona, confront the shadow, and then integrate it. For a narcissist who is not ready for that process, truth does not bring liberation, it brings threat. And when confronted with threat, the natural reflex is to retreat to safety. The option is that place of safety. Not because the option is better, not because the option is more compatible, but because the option allows them to stay where they are. There is no need to learn how to tolerate difficult emotions, no need to repair old patterns, no need to trade power for connection. All that is required is to maintain the surface. The chosen one does not allow this postponement. You force avoided questions to surface. You make inconsistency visible. You render old strategies ineffective. And because of that, even if they have feelings for you, they still choose to step back, not because they do not see your value, but because that value comes with a price they are unwilling to pay. This is the point many people misunderstand. They believe that if a narcissist truly loved someone, they would change. But for an emotionally immature narcissist, love does not lead to change. Love only exposes their incapacity for change. And when faced with that incapacity, they return to what is comfortable to soothe themselves. The option receives kindness because the option does not place them before a difficult choice. The chosen one receives harshness because your very existence forces a choice: to continue living through the persona or to step into the real self. When they are not ready, they will always choose the option that hurts less in the short term. In the end, what matters most is not how kindly the narcissist treats the option or how harshly they treat you. Those behaviors are only the surface of a deeper structure. They choose what is comfortable in order to survive, not what is true in order to grow. And you, the one they chose, are that truth. You are not wrong for noticing that you were treated worse than those who remain superficial. You are not imagining things when everything feels illogical. In a system driven by avoidance, the person who carries depth is always the one who exposes reality. And reality, to an ego that is not ready, is always perceived as a threat. Understanding this is not meant to make you forgive more, endure more, or wait longer. It is meant to help you stop doubting yourself. You do not need to become easier to be loved. You do not need to make yourself smaller so someone else can feel safe. You do not need to compete with an option in a game where the prize is only a mask. The real turning point comes when you realize this: the narcissist's inability to choose you is not your failure, it is their limitation. You represent a form of attachment they do not yet have the capacity to sustain. And no amount of patience, understanding, or self-sacrifice can substitute for that capacity. At this point, the choice is no longer in their hands. You can continue standing there, waiting for them to become brave enough to face the truth. Or you can step out of the position of carrying what they have never processed. Stepping away is not manipulation. It is not an attempt to prove your worth. It is the end of a loop you did not create. Because real love does not require you to disappear so someone else can feel safe. Real love does not ask you to stay silent to keep the peace. And real love does not place you beside options and leave you questioning your worth. If there is one thing to take with you after all of this, it is very simple. You are not an option. And you do not need to be chosen by someone who only chooses what is comfortable. When you stop waiting, stop explaining, stop sacrificing yourself to be kept, you lose nothing. You simply return responsibility to where it belongs and remove yourself from a structure that was never built to hold the truth. And in that moment, quiet as it may be, that is the moment you step out of the narcissist's shadow, not with resentment, but with sovereignty.